The forbidden boundary. Captain Zara Voss pressed her scaled fingers against the cold metal of her ship's viewport, staring at the star charts that had haunted her dreams for months. The red zone glowed ominously on her navigation display, a perfect sphere of space that every civilized species had learned to avoid. Sol system, the dead zone, the place where an entire species had supposedly vanished without a trace. For 300 years, no ship had returned from those coordinates. No signals, no wreckage, nothing but an invisible wall of death that stretched across 17 light-years in every direction. The Galactic Council had declared it a natural phenomenon, a space anomaly that consumed matter and energy. But Zara knew better. She was a Caliphate, one of the few species gifted with perfect memory. Her people served as the galaxy's librarians and historians, and she had spent her life studying the archives that others preferred to forget. Deep in the restricted vaults of the Central Library, she had found records that changed everything she thought she knew about the humans. The official story was simple. Humanity had been a primitive species, barely worthy of contact. They had been violent, unstable, and ultimately self-destructive. When they mysteriously disappeared, the galaxy had mourned briefly and moved on. But the sealed records told a different story entirely. Zara's ship, the Memory Keeper, drifted at the edge of the dead zone's boundary. Her crew of 4 trusted colleagues watched nervously as she studied the data one more time. The truth was almost too incredible to believe, but the evidence was undeniable. 350 years ago, humanity had been invited to join the Galactic Council. They had been eager, hopeful, and willing to share their knowledge and resources. For 50 years, they had been model citizens of the galaxy, contributing to science, art, and culture in ways that amazed even the oldest species, but fear had poisoned the relationship. Humanity's rapid technological advancement had worried the Council. Their military potential had been seen as a threat. Their independence had been viewed as dangerous. So the Council had made a decision that would haunt the galaxy for centuries. They had betrayed humanity. The records showed the truth that had been hidden from the galaxy. Humanity hadn't vanished mysteriously. They had been systematically isolated, their trade routes cut, their colonies abandoned by their supposed allies. When they had asked for help during a terrible plague that swept their worlds, the Council had turned their backs. When they had begged for medical supplies for their dying children, they had been ignored. The final betrayal had come when the Council had declared humanity a quarantine risk and forbidden all contact with their space. They had expected the species to quietly die out, forgotten and alone. Instead, something else had happened. The humans had survived, and they had learned. Zara's research had revealed fragments of the truth, automated beacons at the edge of human space, still functioning after 3 centuries. Energy signatures that suggested massive construction projects within the dead zone. Most disturbing of all, reports of ships that had been scanned by unknown technology before being turned away from the boundary. The humans weren't dead. They were watching. "Captain," came the voice of her navigator, Kren. The young Vorthan's 4 eyes were wide with fear. "We're receiving a transmission." Zara felt her blood chill. No one was supposed to be out here. The nearest inhabited system was days away, and no Council ship would dare approach the dead zone. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was calm, measured, and unmistakably human. "Unknown vessel, you are approaching restricted space. State your intentions." For a moment, Zara couldn't breathe. She was hearing the voice of a supposedly extinct species, speaking flawless galactic standard with an accent she had only heard in ancient recordings. Her crew stared at her in shock, waiting for her to respond. "This is Captain Zara Voss of the Memory Keeper," she said finally. "I am a researcher studying the history of this region. I mean no harm." There was a long pause. When the voice spoke again, it seemed almost amused. "Captain Voss, we know who you are. We've been watching your research for some time. You've been asking dangerous questions. You've been watching." "Me?" Zara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We watch everything, Captain. Every ship that approaches our boundary. Every council meeting where our name is mentioned. Every attempt to explain our disappearance with comfortable lies." The voice paused. "You're different, though. You've been searching for the truth." Zara's engineer, a massive Thraxian named Borak, spoke up nervously. "Captain, we should leave. This is madness." But Zara couldn't turn away. Not when she was finally getting the answers she had sought for so long. "What happened to your people?" she asked. "The records show the Council's betrayal, but they don't explain what came after." "What came after," the voice said softly, "was a choice. We could have fought. We could have sought revenge. Instead, we chose to disappear. To let the galaxy believe we were gone while we rebuilt ourselves away from those who had abandoned us." "But why?" Zara pressed. "Why hide for 3 centuries?" "Because we were weak," the voice replied. "We trusted to isolate. We believed that good intentions would be enough to bridge the gap between species. The Council taught us that the galaxy wasn't ready for that kind of trust." A new signature appeared on Zara's sensors. A ship was approaching, but it wasn't like anything in her databases. The design was sleek and organic, as if it had been grown rather than built. It moved with a fluid grace that made her own vessel seem clumsy by comparison. "Captain," her weapons officer, Nix, whispered urgently, "I'm reading power levels unlike anything I've ever seen. This ship could vaporize us without effort, but the human vessel made no threatening moves. It simply matched their course and speed, maintaining a respectful distance. We're not here to harm you, Captain Voss," the voice continued. "We're here because you've earned something that few in the galaxy have received in 3 centuries. You've earned the right to see the truth." "The truth about what?" "About what humanity became during our isolation. About what we've been building while the galaxy forgot us. About what we're preparing for." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. Preparing for what? For the day when the galaxy is ready to face the consequences of its choices. For the day when the Council realizes that abandoning a species to die has consequences that can't be ignored forever. The human ship began to move away, but the voice continued. "Captain Voss, you have a choice to make. You can return to your people and report that the dead zone remains empty and dangerous. You can file your findings and let the galaxy continue believing its comfortable lies, or ... Or you can follow us. You can see what humanity has become. You can witness the civilization that was forged in isolation and tempered by betrayal. But understand this, Captain. If you choose to see the truth, you'll become part of it. There will be no going back to the way things were." Zara looked at her crew. Kren was shaking his head frantically. Borak was already plotting a course back to Council space. Nix had her hand on the weapons console, though they all knew it would be useless against the human vessel. Only her communications officer, Vera, met her eyes with something approaching understanding. "What would you have me do?" Zara asked the voice. "Help us show the galaxy that humanity never died. Help us prove that the Council's betrayal created..." something far more dangerous than the primitive species they tried to abandon. Help us demonstrate that isolation doesn't make a species weak. It makes them patient, Zara whispered, understanding flooding through her. Exactly, we've been patient for 3 centuries, Captain. We've watched, we've learned, we've grown. And now, we're ready to remind the galaxy what it means to face a species that has nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The human ship was already disappearing into the depths of the dead zone, but the voice continued to speak. Follow us if you dare, Captain Voss. But know this, once you cross that boundary, you'll be witness to the greatest transformation in galactic history. You'll see what humanity has become when it was forced to choose between extinction and evolution. Zara looked at the navigation display. The red zone waited before them, promising either death or revelation. Her crew watched her with a mixture of fear and curiosity. She thought about the centuries of lies, the hidden records, the abandoned species that had been written off as extinct. She thought about the truth. Plot a course, she said quietly. We're going in. The memory keeper crossed the boundary into the dead zone, following the human ship into the darkness. Behind them, the galaxy continued its daily existence, unaware that its greatest secret was about to be revealed. Ahead lay the truth about humanity's fate, and the reckoning that had been 3 centuries in the making. As they traveled deeper into the supposedly empty space, Zara began to detect something that made her scales tingle with excitement and terror. Energy signatures, massive ones. The readings suggested construction on a scale that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity hadn't just survived their abandonment, they had thrived. And now they were ready to show the galaxy exactly what they had been building while the Council pretended they were dead. The question was, would the galaxy survive the revelation? The awakening storm, what Zara Voss saw when they reached the heart of the dead zone, would have broken the minds of lesser beings. Where Sol System should have been a collection of 9 planets orbiting a yellow star. She found something that redefined her understanding of what was possible. The entire system had been transformed into a vast mechanical garden. Massive structures orbited every celestial body, connected by streams of energy that pulsed like the arteries of some cosmic organism. Space stations the size of moons hung in perfect formation, their surfaces gleaming with technology that seemed almost alive. And everywhere, ships moved with purpose and precision that spoke of a civilization operating at levels far beyond anything the galaxy had ever achieved. By the ancestors, Kren whispered, his 4 eyes unable to process the scale of what they were seeing. How many humans are there? The voice that had guided them answered with quiet pride. 47 billion souls, spread across 12 worlds, and 300 stations. We've been busy during our isolation. Zara's mind reeled. When humanity had been abandoned, their population had been barely 3 billion, confined to Earth and a handful of struggling colonies. In 3 centuries, they had not only survived, but had multiplied and expanded beyond anything the galaxy thought possible. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation, the voice continued. And now Zara could see the massive vessel that had been escorting them. It was beautiful and terrible, shaped like a crystalline flower but radiating power that made her ship's sensors scream warnings. Welcome to New Sol, Captain Voss. Welcome to what humanity built when the galaxy turned its back. The memory keeper was guided to a docking facility that could have housed 100 ships her size. As they approached, Zara saw humans for the first time in her life. They moved with confidence and purpose, their faces calm but alert. These weren't the desperate survivors she had expected. These were the inheritors of a species that had been forged in isolation and tempered by necessity. Admiral Chen met them at the airlock. She was tall and graceful, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. She wore a uniform that was both elegant and practical, marked with symbols that spoke of rank and achievement. In a military structure the galaxy had never known existed. "Captain Voss," she said, extending her hand in the ancient human gesture of greeting. "I've read your research. Your dedication to uncovering the truth is admirable, if dangerous." Zara accepted the handshake, marveling at the strange ritual. "Admiral, what I've seen here changes everything. The galaxy believes your species is extinct." "The galaxy believes what it wants to believe," Chen replied. "It's easier to assume we died quietly than to face the consequences of abandoning us. But we didn't die, Captain, we learned." As they walked through the station, Zara saw wonders that defied explanation. Gardens that grew in impossible geometries, powered by starlight and tended by machines that moved like living creatures. Libraries that contained not just the knowledge of humanity, but the preserved wisdom of every species that had ever shown them kindness. Laboratories where human scientists worked alongside. Artificial intelligences so advanced they seemed like gods made of light and thought. But it was the memorial chamber that truly broke her heart. The vast space contained billions of names, carved in stone and metal and crystal. Every human who had died during the plague years, when the galaxy had turned its back. Every child who had perished while the Council debated whether to provide aid. Every soul lost to the isolation and abandonment that had followed humanity's rejection. "We remember them all," Admiral Chen said quietly. "Every name, every life, every moment of suffering that could have been prevented if the galaxy had chosen compassion over fear." "How do you not hate us?" Zara whispered, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the loss. "Because hate would have made us like them," Chen replied. "Instead, we chose to become something better, something stronger, something that could never be abandoned or betrayed again." They were interrupted by an urgent alarm. Throughout the station, lights began flashing in patterns that spoke of immediate action. Chen's expression hardened as she received a communication through a device that seemed to connect directly to her nervous system. "What is it?" Zara asked. "The Vorthan hegemony has just declared war on the Kelethi Republic," Chen said grimly. "Your people are under attack, Captain. The same fear and paranoia that drove humanity into isolation is tearing the galaxy apart." Zara felt her blood turn to ice. The Vorthans had been growing aggressive for years, claiming that other species were plotting against them. With their perfect memories and vast archives, had become particular targets of suspicion. But she had never imagined it would lead to open warfare. "My people," she whispered, "my world, 43 billion Kelethi are about to face extermination." Chen said, "The Council is paralyzed by politics and fear. By the time they act, it'll be too late. You have to help them," Zara pleaded. "You have the power. I've seen your technology." Chen studied her for a long moment. "Why should we? The galaxy abandoned us to die. When we begged for help, we were ignored. When our children were dying of plague, the Council debated whether we deserved to live. Why should we risk ourselves for a galaxy that has shown us nothing but cruelty?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Zara knew she had no right to ask for help. Her people had been part of the Council that had betrayed humanity. They had voted to isolate Earth, had turned their backs when help was needed most. By every measure of justice, humanity owed them nothing. But as she looked at the memorial chamber, at the billions of names carved in eternal remembrance, she saw something else. She saw the faces of her own people, who would soon join those ranks of the lost and forgotten. "Because you're better than we were," she said finally. "Because you chose to become something greater than your pain. Because helping us now would prove that humanity learned the right lessons from its suffering." Admiral Chen was quiet for so long that Zara began to fear she had said the wrong thing. Then, slowly, the human woman began to smile. "You know what the most remarkable thing about humanity is, Captain?" she asked. "We've always been at our best when we're helping others, even when those others don't deserve it, even when they've hurt us, even when they've betrayed us." Alarms began sounding throughout the station, but these weren't warnings of danger. They were calls to action. Across the vast network of human space, ships began moving with purpose that spoke of long-prepared plans finally put into motion. 3 centuries ago, the galaxy thought it was containing a threat by isolating humanity, Chen said as they watched the vast fleet begin to assemble. What it actually did was give us time to become what we were always meant to be. Not conquerors, not destroyers, protectors. The ships that emerged from human space were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They moved with liquid grace, their hulls seeming to shift and flow like living metal. They were beautiful and terrible, works of art that happened to be the most advanced warships ever created. But as they reached Calathi space, they didn't attack the Vorthan fleet. Instead, they simply positioned themselves between the aggressors and their targets. When the Vorthans fired, the human ships absorbed the energy and redirected it harmlessly into space. When the attackers tried to maneuver around them, the humans matched every movement with casual ease. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran." "Federation," came the transmission that was broadcast across the galaxy. "The species you thought extinct has returned. We have watched your conflicts with sadness and concern. We have seen fear and paranoia replace cooperation and understanding. This ends now." The demonstration that followed was carefully calculated to inspire awe without causing harm. Human ships danced through space like schools of fish, their movements so perfectly coordinated that they seemed to share a single mind. They disabled weapons without destroying ships, rescued crew members from damaged vessels regardless of species, and provided medical aid to those who needed it. In 6 hours, they ended a war that could have lasted years. But the true message was delivered not through force, but through mercy. As the human fleet withdrew, it left behind medical stations, supply depots, and communication networks that would benefit all species. They also left a simple message that would reshape galactic politics forever. The age of abandonment is over. The age of cooperation begins now. Any species that chooses violence over dialogue, fear over understanding, will find humanity standing against them. Any species that chooses peace, growth, and mutual respect will find humanity standing with them. The galaxy's response was immediate and overwhelming. Some species reacted with fear, demanding that the Council take action against the returning humans. Others saw opportunity, reaching out to establish contact with the civilization that had been hidden for 3 centuries, but most simply watched in amazement as humanity demonstrated what they had become during their isolation. They had evolved beyond the need for conquest. They had transcended the desire for revenge. They had become what every species secretly hoped to become: a people who had learnt to turn their greatest suffering into their greatest strength. Captain Zara Voss stood on the observation deck of the human station, watching as ships from across the galaxy began arriving for the first galactic assembly in 3 centuries. Humans would take their place at the table not as supplicants or subjects, but as equals. The dead zone was no more. In its place stood the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. One built not on the bones of the conquered, but on the dreams of the redeemed. "Thank you," she said to Admiral Chen, who stood beside her watching the historic moment unfold. "Thank you, Captain," Chen replied. "You reminded us that even in our darkest hour, there are those who choose truth over comfort, understanding over fear. That's a lesson worth remembering, no matter what species we are." As the first ships began docking, beginning a new chapter in galactic history, Zara realized that humanity's greatest triumph wasn't their technology or their power. It was their choice to remain human, even when the galaxy had tried to take that humanity away from them. The silent watchers had emerged from their long vigil. The galaxy would never be the same.